Yeah, we here. We're live. We're opening. We're chalking it up, leaving it. Doing the things, putting the tab on the game. That's how we do, people. Roundtable here, roundtable here, roundtable here. I think it's just me today. Trying to find my damn intro. Trying to find it. I can't believe. Oh my goodness. All right. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy. You know we doing this, man. Air horns out. Air horns dropping, man. We here, man. It's your boy, man. It's Sage Elias, man. Today, my webcam, or what I use as a webcam, is not working today. So, it's just audio, but we're leaving you guys with that good stuff today, because today we have the House of Representatives literally sitting there debating with the debate of Mark Meadows. I've been watching it, and I was like, let me just start an hour early, put on this little pod, and here we go.
Women wearing hijabs to hate speech and from public
to hate
officials
speech and
to
public
bullying and
officials.
violence of children at school. Think of how the children hear this. And as we all know, the bigotry is targeted at one of our own, shamefully from within this congressional community. Racism, bigotry of any form, including Islamophobia, must always be called out and condemned in any place it is found. This is particularly true in the halls of Congress, which are the very heart of our democracy, and where we have a responsibility under the rules of the
What's going on, everybody? Like
to this body.
Fuck people that hate on the Islams, man.
Looking over us. Over 200
we can't see it, honey.
years ago, in a letter to the Hebrew congregation in Newport, George Washington wrote, "Happily, the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under the protection should demean themselves as good citizens in giving in on all occasion their effectual support." He himself defining what is the right way to live. Indeed, bigotry and persecution have always been un-American, as demonstrated by our patriarch, George Washington.
The American, the first American.
Other members of our
Let that be known.
Community. As hundreds of Muslim staffers wrote last week, Mr. Speaker, they wrote this letter. They said, quote, hateful rhetoric by public officials directly.
What's going on, Facebook user? What's going on? I can't see your name.
Both at the workplace and in our everyday lives. They further went on to.
I'm so sorry, real quick, for everybody on Facebook that's chatting with me, because on StreamYard it doesn't show your names. It just says Facebook user. Put your name in there. Hey, for not your first and last. I don't want to know your government. I don't really care that much. But just put your first name. Hey, so I can say, instead of me saying hi to a random person or a blank Facebook user, let me add a name to that. What's going on, everybody? House of Representatives debate of Mark Meadows. Oh, I love it.
To say the Muslim staffers whom we value here, we must now come to work every day knowing that the same members and staff who perpetuate Islamophobic tropes and insinuate.
James, what's up, James?
Also walk by us in the halls of Congress. It's really frightening.
Super frightening, darling.
Disturbingly, Islamophobia is not a unique American experience, but a global scourge, and as other members have indicated, it's global. Earlier this year, the UN Human Rights Council declared that discrimination against Muslims has risen to epidemic proportions. Around the world, we see tragedy and tragic consequences of anti-Muslim attitudes. The genocide against the Uyghur people and other Muslim minorities in China, atrocities committed against the Rohingya in Burma, attacks on Muslim refugees in Central Europe, and white supremacist violence against Muslims in New Zealand and Canada, targeting of Muslim minority communities in Western Asia and the Middle East. We must confront Islamophobia on any form of racism or any form of racism, wherever it is found around the world, in our country, or even in these very halls. This legislation will not only address the rise in incidents of Islamophobia worldwide, but launch a plan to combat this bigotry. Thank you, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, for your leadership in advancing equity, justice, and dignity in our Congress, in America, and the world on this action. Thank you also to the Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman, Gregory Meeks, Mr. Chairman, for your support of this important action. With this bill's passage, Mr. Speaker, a special envoy for monitoring and combating Islamophobia will be created, just as the State Department has special envoys on anti-Semitism and international religious freedom. That is something we have always shared in this body, across the aisle and down across the Capitol, in a bipartisan way, support for and respect for religious freedom at home and internationally. This envoy, the special envoy created here, will be charged with establishing a comprehensive strategy to combat Islamophobia worldwide. The State Department annual human rights reports will be expanded to include state-sponsored Islamophobic violence and impunity. As a nation that prides itself in the defense of human rights and dignity, we must be leaders both on the global stage and at home by example to combat violence against Muslims. Again, Islamophobia in any place is offensive, dangerous, and must be condemned. And Islamophobia in our own congressional community, specifically the repeating, ongoing, and target Islamophobic comments and actions against another member, as we witnessed this past year, is appalling and totally unacceptable. That language and behavior are far beneath the dignity of integrity, and decency with which the Constitution and our constituents require that we act in this House. These actions must be called out and not tolerated. Mr. Speaker, every day that we're in session, we begin with a prayer. Because we believe in our own way. Some don't believe, but by and large, most people here believe. We do so with reverence for our own religious beliefs, with respect for the beliefs of others. If we didn't have such strong beliefs in ourselves and our own religion, it would be easy to believe where somebody might be frivolous about respecting someone else's devotion. But we do. Take real action. We all to combat Islamophobia, as we have many times taken action to condemn anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to the makers of this motion, Congresswoman Schakowsky, who was very much a part of this, and Congresswoman Omar. I yield back the balance of my time and urge a strong bipartisan vote on this important legislation.
Gentleman from New York is prepared to close. I am ready.
Ready to call.
Thank you.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just first say that all of us support anti-Muslim persecution. We're seeing a lot of that in Afghanistan today, especially the small children. We deplore violence on violence, Sunni against Shia. No one should ever be attacked, though, or denied their human rights or dignity because of their faith. I believe both sides of the aisle agree on this. And I personally agree with the intent and the spirit of this bill. The United States government is rightly committed to opposing these acts of violence that we have seen directed at Muslims around the world. State Department has an office to do so. What I do object to, Mr. Speaker, is the unfortunate circumstance that the bill before us abandons the usual statutory language about violations of internationally recognized human rights. Instead, it uses this vague term, Islamophobia. Look it up on Wikipedia, it says it can mean many things. This Islamophobia is not designed. It's not, we're against the anti-Muslim persecution or against international human rights violations against Muslims, but rather this Islamophobia. In connection with that, I'd like to quote a 2016 article from Columbia Law Review that states, quote, "There is no singular, cogent, or consensus definition of Islamophobia," end quote. Similarly, the University of Oslo's Center for Research and Extremism calls Islamophobia a, quote, contested term.
Okay.
These are law review articles, not mine. And it goes on further to say that the term conflates opposition to Islam with prejudice towards Muslims. These expert descriptions underscore the need for due diligence that this text has not yet received. I wish the minority had been given opportunity to discuss this bill before it was thrown in on the markup. For we all oppose religious persecution.
All right, so I gotta pause it right here because I gotta say my piece. All right, we in 2021, folks. Like, there's no more there should be no more excuses for this type of stuff, man. Like we in 2021, bro. Hating someone for their lifestyle or their religion or what they believe or anything of that sort is extremely childish. It's extremely clownish. It's wrong, and we shouldn't be doing that. And if you're on this live, and if you're one of these, you're a citizen that sits here and thinks like, "Hey, man, fuck the Muslims, blah, blah, all this other shit," then I would personally tell you, and I will personally revoke your VOP membership citizenship and tell you that you are not part of the citizens of this empire. Because honestly, that's just clown shit. Like, we're way too old enough. Like, we all got, we're not in the fucking 20s or 50s where we don't really know, and that conversation isn't really brought up as much. Like, it's brought up now. If you're really shitting on another culture, like, and if these refugees that are literally having it hard, like, that's corny on your behalf.
Against Muslims or any other faith. I'm a Catholic. Any other believers in any faith should be protected from this hate speech and violence. So for those reasons, because the definition is not provided, Islamophobia is a very broad term that can be subject to many interpretations. If we don't define that in the Congress through legislative intent, who will?
Yep.
That means we see
100%
over to the executive branch, and then they write what Islamophobia means.
That's 100%.
I wish we had used different terminologies that are in statute.
You should have been smarter, yeah.
Law, rather than something that's sort of born on a Wikipedia page. To me, that's not the way we legislate here. And I've done a lot of great legislation with the chairman and the previous chairman of this committee, and I intend to keep doing that with him. And I appreciate our joint efforts, though, to advance strong, responsible, bipartisan. And I appreciate that. I know this has been a heated debate, and some things have been said today that, could be offensive. And this is not about one member of Congress. this is about our ability to come together as Americans and come out with a strong, bipartisan bill that makes sense. So we can send the message around the world that this will not be tolerated. Just as
Yo, fuck the world, man. Worry about ourselves. Why are we always focused about the world?
And with the bill that's going to follow this.
We should focus on ourselves.
So with that, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for the time. Chairman, it's been a rigorous debate. We expected this. But I thank you, and I yield back the balance.
Gentleman from Texas yields back balance of his time. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. McCall, for your statements. And yes, we work very closely together, as well as many members in this House, especially on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Strong fighters on both sides of the aisle for human rights. But the question that presents itself with this plain and simple bill that simply calls for us to establish an office to monitor and combat Islamophobia at the State Department. The question is, do we all agree? And I think I've heard my colleagues on the other side says Islamophobia is wrong.
Yep.
That means you know that Islamophobia exists. You know it when you see it. You know it when you feel it. You know it when you talk about the Uyghurs, the Rohingyas, or right here in the United States of America.
That's right.
There is the definition right there. You see it. They've said it. We've said it. Islamophobia exists. So what we need to do is call it out. What we need to do is to lock arms and stand together. This is an important bill. The camera of history is rolling on us.
That's right.
It's an important bill, and it's a bill of consequence. It's of consequence, should be of consequence. It's important to nearly 2 billion Muslims in the world. So we need to focus on what this bill does. You know, some of the proudest moments of mine, I represent one of the most diverse districts in all of the United States, in the most diverse county in the United States. And I've seen ugliness raise its ugly head, whether it's racism, anti-Semitism, or Islamophobia. But the proud moment is when I see Muslims and Jews walking arm in arm against Islamophobia and against anti-Semitism. When I see people of all races and nationalities standing together, not being silent.
That's right.
Inaction is unacceptable. We cannot stand idly by as atrocity after atrocity is inflicted on people of the Muslim faith.
That's right.
Or any faith. For no reason other than bigotry against their religion. Freedom of religion is a human right. We can and we must do better at combating Islamophobia here at home and abroad.
At home first.
So I look, and I wish it was today, but I keep dreams and hopes alive that we will lock arms, and we got good people here, and say in unison, as I've seen people do in my district, that we're going to call out Islamophobia wherever we see it, the same with racism, and the same with anti-Semitism. This bill that everybody's watching, and we travel a lot on our committee, we know that people watch what's happening on this floor. They take it to their gut. And I hope that they look at this bill and know that we're going to call it out and not accept it. Silence will not be accepted. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Pursuant to House Resolution 849, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
To establish in the Department of State the Office to monitor and combat Islamophobia and for other purposes.
The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Speaker,
Gentleman from Texas.
I request the yeas and the nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings are postponed.
Yeah, let me know if you guys still hear an echo and whatnot.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to take from the desk the bill S3377, the Capitol Police Emergency Assistance Act of 2021, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 3377, an act to empower the Chief of the United States Capitol Police to unilaterally request the assistance of the D.C. National Guard or federal law enforcement agencies in emergencies without prior approval of the Capitol Police Board.
Is there objection to the consideration of the bill? Without objection, the bill is read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions.
Guys, just again, let me know if the sound is repeating. I'll work on that live.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6256, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6256, a bill to ensure that goods made with forced labor in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of the People's Republic of China do not enter the United States market and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, and the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 6256.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I rise today in strong support of H.R. 6256, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, introduced by my good friend and colleague and chair of the Rules Committee, McGovern. Last week, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, we passed Chair McGovern's original legislation on the House floor. I heard my Republican friends comment that this bill was being slow-walked by the House Democrats, that we were supposedly passing Chairman McGovern's bill to stall and negotiate the Senate bill, and that even if we did eventually reach agreement, my colleagues across the aisle surmised that the president would not support the compromise package. Now here we are less than 6 days later, and a compromise between the House and the Senate versions has already been negotiated. And just a few hours ago, unsurprisingly, the Biden administration announced that it would sign this vital piece of legislation. The biggest difference between the two packages was the House call for implementation in 120 days. The Senate wanted to wait 270 days. We have negotiated them down to 180 days. The crucial protections of this law will come into effect months earlier because of House Democrats. So let me be clear. This is a good thing, because it is a bipartisan measure. And I'm glad that such an important legislation will pass with near unanimous support from both parties. That's what this should be. Since 2017, the People's Republic of China has systematically carried out mass detention, torture, political indoctrination, restrictions on religious practices, inhumane atrocities against Uyghurs and members of other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang. We have seen the People's Republic of China expand its extensive program of repression and transform it into a state of state-sponsored forced labor. Under the guise of vocational training or poverty alleviation, authorities in Xinjiang have forced thousands of adults and children to work against their will, under threat of punishment to produce goods and raw materials that are then woven into international supply chains and then to our homes. This bill, which has passed the House before, prohibits the import of goods from merchandise from Xinjiang unless the importer can prove the products did not come from forced labor, imposes sanctions on officials facilitating the use of forced labor against Chinese ethnic minorities, add important financial disclosures for public companies that do business in the region. And it also calls for diplomatic strategy to address forced labor in Xinjiang. This is a straightforward bill. It signals that America will not tolerate forced labor, and products made from forced labor shall not enter the American marketplace. In 2021, for any country to realize or utilize forced labor systemically and to oppress and exploit its population is unconscionable, unacceptable, and indeed un-American. And we cannot and will not stand idly by. This legislation is critical to showing that we are putting human rights at the center of our foreign and economic policy. And so, I support this bill, and I look forward to continuing to work. And I want to thank Mr. Barr, and I know Mr. McCall, and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for going forward and speaking up. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, my good friend from New York, Mr. Meeks, for his leadership in helping support this legislation, bringing it to the House floor. And I want to thank the gentleman from Massachusetts for his leadership in recognizing this serious human rights travesty that's happening. I also want to thank the 11 House Foreign Affairs Committee Republicans who are co-sponsors of this legislation, including Mr. Smith of New Jersey. And I want to thank Senator Rubio from Florida for working with the gentleman from Massachusetts on finding a bipartisan and bicameral compromise to bring this important legislation to the floor. And Mr. Speaker, it is past time for this chamber and the Congress to act to stop the Chinese Communist Party from using American consumers to subsidize its brutality, preventing products made with slave labor from contaminating our market is long-standing priority of U.S. trade, not just because it puts American manufacturers at a disadvantage, but because the American values that we all share will not tolerate it. Truly free trade cannot involve slave labor. But today, the CCP is using the forced labor of Uyghurs and other minorities to help bankroll its genocide against those very same groups. The repression taking place right now in Xinjiang is breathtaking in its scope and in its brutality. More than 1 million people have been locked in concentration camps, subjected to surveillance and brainwashing on a massive scale. Families are being broken up, and children are being taken from their parents. Forced sterilization and forced abortion are being used to limit births among ethnic groups targeted by the CCP. This is outrageous human rights violations, and the world cannot turn a blind eye. It is a horrific warning, not only to China's neighbors and to the American people, but to the world. The Chinese Communist Party is fundamentally focused on expanding its power and its authoritarian style of government. It views things that it does not control, like religion, cultural identity, and the yearning of all people for freedom, as threats that must be destroyed. And because we've drawn the CCP into many of our most critical supply chains, it has the ability to hold our national security hostage while it uses U.S. consumers to subsidize its atrocities. This cannot stand. As many as 1 in 5 cotton garments globally are potentially tainted with Uyghur slave labor. Last year, U.S. Customs and Border Protection seized a 13-ton shipment of human hair that originated in Xinjiang's forced labor system. We have a duty to prevent the CCP from making Americans complicit in these sickening abuses. For that reason, I support the bipartisan bill before us today, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Kentucky reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Now, my pleasure to yield 3 minutes to the sponsor of this bill, the chairman of the Rules Committee from the great state of Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, and I want to thank Chairman Meeks for yielding me the time and for his leadership on this important issue. Mr. Speaker, I am glad that we are able to move this compromised Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act so quickly after the House passed my bill, H.R. 1155, last week. And I want to thank my partner in this effort in the Senate, Senator Marco Rubio, for working quickly and diligently with
Man, Marco Rubio! It's my dad's
I want
friend.
to especially thank Speaker Pelosi for her strong moral leadership in getting this done. No one in this body, and I mean no one, has had a more consistent and principled position in standing up for the human rights of the people of China and Tibet. She has been a critical part of nearly every single piece of China human rights legislation focused on China that Congress has passed in recent years, and her steadfast commitment to getting this bill across the finish line is why we are here today. Forced labor is a serious human rights abuse. It is illegal under United States law to import goods made with forced labor. But we are compelled to move this legislation by the genocide and crimes against humanity being committed by the Chinese government against Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities.
Is it still skipping Facebook user? Or James, whoever it is that's
We
there?
must pass this legislation to give Americans the peace of mind that the clothes they wear, the food they eat, and the technology that they use are not tainted by forced labor perpetrated by the Chinese government.
Mm-hmm.
This bill combines my legislation, which passed the House by a vote of 428 to 1 last week, and Senator Rubio's bill, which passed by voice vote, into a version that both chambers can support. This is a strong, bipartisan, bicameral consensus bill. This bill shortens the time the forced labor import ban goes into effect to 180 days from the Senate's 300 days. It requires a strong, clear, and convincing evidence standard for exceptions to the rebuttable presumption. It empowers the Forced Labor Enforcement Task Force to devise and oversee the strategy to prohibit the import of forced labor goods from Xinjiang. In short, this is a good bill. It is a tougher bill than what passed the Senate, and I want to thank my House colleagues for their support. I want to thank Chairman Meeks again. I want to thank Ranking Member McCall, Chairman Neal, and Chairwoman Waters for their work. I want to thank Congressman Chris Smith in New Jersey for all of his support. On the Senate side, I want to thank Senators Rubio and Merkley for their leadership. And again, I want to thank Speaker Pelosi for her strong and steadfast commitment to getting this done. So let's stand up for human rights. Let's stand against genocide and against crimes against humanity. And let's get the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act to the President's desk as soon as possible. I yield back my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith, a member of this body who, for many, many years has been a champion of human rights, and frankly, no one has done more to advance the cause of human rights than my colleague from New Jersey. I'm pleased to yield 4 minutes. 4 minutes to the gentleman.
Very much. Thank you,
Gentleman
my good
from New
friend,
Jersey is recognized
for yielding and
4
for his
minutes.
leadership. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for their concerted efforts to get this legislation and like-minded legislation moving forward. And of course, Jim McGovern, he and I, he's the prime sponsor. I'm the prime Republican co-sponsor. I want to thank him for his leadership on this as well. It's so very, very important. Mr. Speaker, Miracle Tersi said she pleaded with God to end her life as her Christian jailers increased the electrical currents coursing through her body. Miracle,
All right,
Muslim
fix
Uyghur,
the
who's
fix the
escaped from
repeating
Xi
problem.
Jinping's genocide, led her to the United States, actually broke down weeping at a November 28, 2018 congressional hearing co-chaired by Senator Marco Rubio and I as co-chairs of the China
Same to you,
Commission,
John. Same
as
to
she
you, brother.
recounted her experience in one of China's infamous concentration camps. She testified, and I quote her in part, there were around 60 people kept in a 430 square foot cell so that nights 10 to 15 women would stand up while the rest of us would sleep on our sides. She said there were people there who had not taken a shower in over a year. I clearly remember the torture, she said, in the tiger chair the second time I was incarcerated. I was taken to a special room with an electric chair. It was the interrogation room, and it had one light and one chair. There were belts and whips hanging on the wall. I was placed in a high chair that clicked to lock my arms and legs in place and tightened when they pressed the button. She goes on, my head was shaved beforehand for the maximum impact. The authorities put a helmet-like thing on my head. Each time I was electrocuted, she went on, my whole body would shake violently, and I could feel the pain in my veins. I thought I would rather die than go through this torture and beg them to kill me. They insulted me with humiliating words and pressured me to admit my guilt. The nights were the busiest time in the camp, she went on. A lot of activities such as transferring people between cells and removing dead bodies would happen all night long. In the silence of the night, we could hear the men from the other cells groaning in agony. We could hear the beatings, the men screaming. While burying my 4-month-old baby, she had had triplets, I was tormented and filled with the guilt of not being able to save my son. She admonished us, pleaded with us, please take action against the Chinese officials responsible for my torture and the death of my little boy and the death of so many innocent Uyghurs in the camps. Mr. Speaker, there are millions and millions of stories just like this waiting to be told, truly nightmarish accounts of President Xi Jinping's genocide. In response, I, joined by my good friend and colleague Tom Swazi, introduced the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act of 2018. But this bill, H.R. 1155, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, Xi Jinping's genocide. Let's not forget, the documents obtained by the New York Times make clear that this is Xi Jinping's genocide. He ordered it, and early next year he'll be hosting the Winter Olympics. The leaked documents show Xi saying things like showing absolutely no mercy in dealing with the Uyghurs and other predominantly Muslim minorities. In one speech, he said, the weapons of the People's Democratic Dictatorship must be wielded without any hesitation or wavering. Mr. Speaker, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act prohibits imports from Xinjiang to the U.S. by creating a rebuttable presumption. And that is the core of this bill, a presumption that all goods produced in the region are made with forced labor unless U.S. Customs and Border Protection certifies by clear and convincing evidence that goods were not produced with forced labor. It's a good bill, deserves the support of every member of this body, and I yield back to my friend Andy.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Kentucky reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
It's my honor to yield 3 minutes to the representative from the great state of Rhode Island, a great member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Representative David Cicilline.
The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the chairman for yielding and thank him for his extraordinary bipartisan leadership on this issue and on so many of the issues that come before our committee. I want to begin by acknowledging the leadership of the speaker, who has been an advocate and a strong voice for human rights around the world, but particularly in China for many, many years. And I rise, Mr. Speaker, in strong support of this bicameral version of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act to ensure that the United States does all we can to condemn the appalling human rights record of the Chinese government against Uyghur Muslims. With the ongoing genocide against the Uyghur population in Xinjiang, and with the crackdown on democracy and the rule of law in Hong Kong, the world has seen what a glimpse of Chinese leadership in the international system would mean. A rejection of human rights, a commitment to authoritarianism, a silenced press, and the abandonment of the rule of law. In Xinjiang, over 1 million members of the Uyghur population have been forced to live in squalor, forced to abandon their beliefs, forced to abandon their children, and forced to work. Many have been tortured, many have died, all have suffered. Policies undertaken in Xinjiang continue to stir the conscience and represent this country's most agonizing human rights catastrophes ever. The Chinese government has unleashed a series of draconian measures that should give anyone in the civilized world a pause. They have mandated abortions, they've forcibly sterilized men and women, they have forcibly taken over 500,000 children from their families, and they've sent them to so-called re-education centers. They monitor the movements and the online activities of millions, ensuring Uyghurs and other minorities are robbed of their privacy, and they force Uyghurs and other minorities into factories for no pay and with no recourse. We must recognize that the Chinese government built its policy over time. What has happened to the Uyghur population is not born out of a spontaneous brutality. It's been a well-planned endeavor designed to extinguish a population that China finds undesirable. This is a systemic policy that denies the Uyghurs their humanity, their dignity, and seeks to ultimately deny them of their existence. We must do all we can to ensure that the clarion call of never again reverberates around the globe. This bill would ensure that goods made in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region imported into the United States are not made with forced labor. I want to thank Chairman McGovern for his extraordinary leadership and urge all my colleagues to support the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And again, thank the chairman for his courtesy. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Kentucky.
I'm ready to close if the chairman is.
I'll reserve, ready to close.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in recent years, the world has stood by as the Chinese Communist Party has detained more than 1 million ethnic minorities in concentration camps where they are tortured, brainwashed, and put into forced labor. This is all part of a deliberate program by the CCP to wipe out their ethnic identity, their religion, their culture, anything that might compete with the Communist Party for their loyalties and affection. We have a moral duty to speak out against these horrifying crimes. But we have an even greater duty to avoid funding this genocide by paying for slave labor in Xinjiang. Many American companies have built their businesses on values that include respect for basic human rights. The United States must continue to lead the world in setting corporate responsibility standards. There can no longer be business as usual with China. The world is watching. While this bill did not go through regular order in the Foreign Affairs Committee, I commend Chairman McGovern and Senator Marco Rubio for coming to this important bipartisan agreement. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your leadership, and it's good to have a bipartisan bill where we stand united in one voice for human rights and to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable. I support this bill. I urge my colleagues to support this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Kentucky yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, H.R. 6256, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, is an opportunity for this body to send a resounding message to the world that we are engaged in a strategic competition with China around the world. And our stance on this issue, I believe, will define why our system is better. We aggressively oppose forced labor and Islamophobia, and we will back up our values with our actions. And in this major piece of legislation, we're doing it together. Democrats and Republicans, working with my ranking member McCall and others, because it's the right thing to do. It's the right message to send. So let us do it. Let us get it out. Let us stand tall. Let us be true to our values. Let not China get away with Islamophobia. And let's make sure we wipe out Islamophobia, racism, and anti-Semitism from all corners of this place that we call the planet Earth. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6256 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Oh, as introduced, apologize. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Okay.
All right. It's been passed. Okay.
Does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 852 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 59, House Resolution 852. Resolved that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the joint resolution, Senate Joint Resolution 33, joint resolution relating to increasing the debt limit. All points of order against consideration of the joint resolution are waived. The joint resolution shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the joint resolution are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the joint resolution and on any amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means or their respective designees. And 2, 1 motion to recommit, 1 motion to commit.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
For this debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman, my distinguished colleague from the Rules Committee from Texas, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purposes of debate only, and I ask unanimous consent that all members be given 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, today the Rules Committee met and reported a rule, House Resolution 852, providing for consideration of SJ Res 33, a joint resolution relating to increasing the debt limit under a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking member of the Committee on Ways and Means or their designees and provides 1 motion to commit. Okay. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to urge my colleagues to adopt the rule and support lifting the nation's debt ceiling. Failing to lift the debt ceiling and defaulting on our debt is not an option. If we do not act, a default could result in the loss of millions of jobs and $15 trillion in household wealth, according to nonpartisan Moody's Analytics economist Mark Zandi. Mr. Zandi has characterized a default as financial Armageddon, and J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon has gone even further, stating that a default could cause an immediate, literally cascading catastrophe of unbelievable proportions and damage America for 100 years. Earlier this year, a bipartisan group of former Treasury secretaries wrote to Congress arguing that protecting U.S. credit worthiness is a sacrosanct responsibility. I couldn't agree more. Let's be clear about what we are talking about here today. The debt limit is the total amount of money that the United States government is authorized to borrow to meet its existing legal obligations, including Social Security and Medicare benefits, payments to veterans and service members, and tax refunds. The debt limit does not authorize any new spending. Let me repeat that. The debt limit does not authorize any new spending. It simply allows the government to pay its bills for obligations that it includes emergency measures to combat the pandemic and increase defense spending. While many on the other side of the aisle have tried to tie raising the debt ceiling to our efforts to pass the president's agenda, it should be noted that 97% of the total national debt accrued before President Biden even took office. Since 1960,
I was
Congress
about to
has
say, I
acted
was like, bro,
78
you're not going to
times
sit here
to
and
address the
blame
debt
Trump
limit,
either, though, right?
49
But all
times
right,
under
bet,
Republican
great. Bring that
presidents
shit back to
and 29
1960,
times
please.
under Democratic presidents.
Please.
I'd like to remind my Republican colleagues, $7.8 trillion of the total national debt was incurred. Arguments about raising the debt ceiling have become nonsensical. In the current discourse, both sides of the aisle have agreed to spend federal dollars on important programs. But only one side of the aisle believes that we should actually fulfill our obligations to pay our creditors for those very same programs. Mr. Speaker, if we choose not to honor our obligations to creditors, what message does that send to the American people and, frankly, the rest of the world? Everyday Americans pay their bills and honor their commitments. Why shouldn't we do the same? Mr. Speaker, it is frankly outrageous to hold the position that we shouldn't be held to the same standard as families who work hard to find a way to pay their bills every day. I urge my colleagues to support the rule and the underlying legislation to raise our nation's debt ceiling, ensuring that America can continue to pay its bills and honor its obligations. And Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the representative for yielding me the customary 30 minutes. And I'll yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
So this rule provides for consideration of SJ Res 33, a bill to raise the debt ceiling by $2.5 trillion. The federal debt limit began over 100 years ago in 1917, and it has been required to be raised 100 times since then. The problem isn't whether we should increase our debt limit. It is that we have to issue debt at all. Debts are issued to cover the difference between what you make and what you spend. When you spend more than you make, you got a way to pay, find a way to pay for the spending. So we are in the middle of a spending spree for the last 11 months. Well over $1 trillion in taxpayer money spent largely on partisan priorities, and more likely coming if the Democrats manage to get a final agreement on the Build Back Better Act, or perhaps what more aptly might be described as a socialist spending scam. On 10 December, the Congressional Budget Office published an estimate of the Build Back Better Act, confirming that the bill's true cost to be almost $5 trillion, $4.9 trillion, while adding $3 trillion in new debt. Democrats claim the bill is paid for, but that is simply not true, and now it is confirmed by independent analysis. Instead of $0, the bill will create a carve-out for deducting state and local taxes that will add almost $250 billion to the deficit. It will protect so-called green companies from a new minimum tax and provide $12,500 tax credits for purchasing an electric vehicle so long as that vehicle is made using union labor. The bill will also provide billions in benefits to the wealthy through the expanded child tax credit that will add over $1.5 trillion to the deficit if this policy is made permanent. And that's, of course, what's being pushed for in the Build Back Better Act. Additionally, the $1 trillion infrastructure bill that the Democrats just ushered into law requires a $118 billion transfer from Treasury to the Highway Trust Fund, which Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has stated will occur tomorrow, December 15th. Republicans will not support raising the debt limit while Democrats push through trillions of dollars for purely partisan political spending and thereby depleting our treasury not just for today, but for
100%.
generations to
Fuck
come.
all that, bro.
Unfortunately, all this spending will only exacerbate the very high rate of inflation. Inflation, which is crippling so many Americans and causing so much suffering in the last 11 months. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in November, the Consumer Price Index rose by 0.8%, but 6.8% over the last 12 months. The most significant increase was in the energy sector, and while prices go up for gas, food, shelter, and vehicles, amongst other things. And then here's the real bad news. We've only seen the tip of the iceberg when it comes to inflation. Likely the inflation rates by March are going to be absolutely astonishing. And that's what happens when you push so many dollars out into an economy that has no way to absorb them. Sure, 2 years ago, we all voted for the CARES Act, $1 trillion to rescue the country from the coronavirus. And then there was additional coronavirus relief passed in December. And then almost immediately another coronavirus bill in February, and then the transportation bill in September, and now the Build Back Better Act. And the economy simply cannot absorb those dollars that the federal government is pushing out. They've got no place to go except to create more and more inflation.
Big
and
ass
who does inflation
facts.
hurt? It hurts those people at
Those
the lower
fucking
end
air horns
of
for
the
this
income
guy.
scale. Despite repeated
Shout out to that guy,
encouragement
bro.
from the Committee on the Budget, Ranking Member Jason Smith and Senator McConnell, Democrats have refused to raise the debt ceiling through reconciliation, which of course is their right to do. They have majorities in both the House and the Senate. They've had ample time to do this, but they simply would not act. So instead, a temporary extension that would only last a couple of months happened earlier this year, and now once again, in the middle of the night, we are having to vote on a bill to increase the national debt in order to pay for Democrats' social spending and infrastructure policies. Democrats claim that raising the debt limit has always been bipartisan, but just a little bit of history. In 1993, the Democrats used reconciliation to raise the debt limit with a party line vote in the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Bill. In 2010, the Democrats again raised the debt limit by $1.9 trillion with a purely party line vote. Republicans voted in opposition out of concern that the then Obama administration and the amount of spending that was occurring. A New York Times article reporting on the vote said, quote, they wanted to raise the debt ceiling enough to avoid putting their members through another such vote prior to the midterm elections, close quote. Do you kind of get the sense that history is repeating itself tonight? Financial success and financial longevity begins years before it's realized. We certainly cannot be reckless and feckless with the nation's future now. Under no argument is this plan fiscally responsible. Under no fantasy is the Build Back Better Act paid for. We have to remember, to be beneficial to the American people, we have to be demonstrative of representative government. We should not be raising the debt limit to allow for continuation of partisan social spending. So with that, I do urge opposition to the rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Those who know me know I'm not a very sophisticated guy, and they'll also know that I'm not a financial wizard. But I will tell you this. I would love to have a philosophical debate, maybe sit down, have a cup of coffee with the distinguished gentleman from Texas, and we might even find some common ground about what our practices ought to be.
All right, but
relative
what's that have to do with right now?
Spending and taxing and all those things. But to be clear, none of what Dr. Burgess just talked about has anything to do with what we're doing here today. 97% of the debt that we have incurred as a nation happened before Joe Biden took office. And as for Build Back Better, which many on our side of the aisle are working to try to enact, that's something that is prospective. We're talking tonight about paying the bills of things that we've already agreed to pay for. So it has absolutely nothing to do with it. I appreciate the distinguished gentleman, because he's trying to bring into this debate many things which have no relevance here, apparently to make a better case. But the truth is, we have a decision before us. It's a serious one. It not only affects the creditworthiness of the United States, but affects global markets. This would be, as I indicated earlier, catastrophic. This is Armageddon if it doesn't happen. And just to note, in 2016, prior to the election of the previous administration, the national debt was $19.5 trillion, or 105% of GDP. In 2020, when the administration's time had run its course, the debt had risen to $27.7 trillion, or 129% of GDP, a $7.8 trillion increase. Included in that was a $1.9 trillion tax cut, which hasn't paid for itself, which has added dramatically to the debt. But the debt has been accumulated during decades of real needs by American public. So we could have a conversation, and frankly, the discussion about spending takes place in the Appropriations Committee, takes place in the Budget Committee, taxation takes place in the Ways and Means Committee. What we're doing now is making a decision to pay our bills. Fundamentally, bottom line, doesn't require a whole lot of sophistication or talk about financial markets. It's clearly a simple question. Are we going to pay for the things that we have agreed to buy? And that's it. It's as simple as you could be. Every household in America makes those decisions. You get something, you get a bill in the mail, you pay for it. Even if you have buyer's remorse, even if your wife says to you that fine exercise thing that you bought, which is going to be the most expensive coat hanger in the house because you're not going to use it, we still pay for it because it's in the house and we bought it. That's as simple as it could possibly be. And with that, I reserve.
Gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield myself so much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, Republicans will amend the rule to immediately consider an amendment to the Democrats' fiscal year 2022 budget resolution to replace the socialist $5 trillion tax and spend reconciliation instructions with new instructions for authorizing committees to produce legislation to reduce the deficit, to combat runaway inflation, currently fueling the highest price spike in 40 years, and to get Americans back to work. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of this amendment into the record, along with extraneous material, immediately prior to the vote on the previous question, and I would now like to yield 4 minutes.
Without objection.
I'd like now to yield 4 minutes to the ranking member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Smith of Missouri, to explain the amendment.
Gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we defeat the previous question, we will consider an amendment to the rule to replace the socialist $5 trillion tax and spend reconciliation instructions from the fiscal year 22 budget with a new call for committees to draft legislation to reduce the deficit, to combat runaway inflation, and help get Americans back to work. This country has been through a lot in the past year under one-party rule by the Washington Democrats and President Biden. We have an inflation crisis, we have an energy crisis, we have a border crisis, and we have a supply chain crisis. And contributing to it all is a leadership crisis at the Oval Office. With all of these problems, you'd think Democrats would finish the year addressing just one of those issues. But instead, Mr. Speaker, we are here on the last day of session for the year, and Democrats have chosen to spend this valuable time attacking former President Trump and his staff, attacking members of the Republican conference, And they've even found room to include a $2.5 trillion increase to the debt ceiling. In fact, since Speaker Pelosi took the gavel in the House in 2019, House Democrats have added more than $9 trillion. House Democrats since 2019 have added more than $9 trillion to the national debt, which is
Jesus
more than the
Christ, bro. 9
combined
trillion?
deficits under all 72 years that Republicans have ever been in the majority. The American people, Mr. Speaker, they deserve a Congress
Oh my
that
God.
is focused on the problems that they are facing in their everyday lives. A Congress that is delivering on policies to stop the runaway rise in prices, a problem that has now reached a 40-year high. Even President Biden's budget in May predicted inflation at 2%. 2%, Mr. Speaker. We are now at over 7%, the highest inflation in 40 years. Folks in the White House administration says that inflation is a high-class problem, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you, the people across America believes it's a real problem. They care about the prices in the grocery store. They don't care about the prices in the stock market. But you know what? House Democrats argue and say inflation is transitory. Yet now they're finally agreeing that these rising costs and prices are actually having a real impact. We could be working on legislation to actually help American families by reducing the cost of energy during the winter. To do that, we need to get rid of the reconciliation instructions in the Democrats' budget, the same reconciliation plan that has paralyzed Washington for months as Democrats fought over how to spend $5 trillion. $5 trillion. Even the Congressional Budget Office on Friday confirmed that what passed out of this chamber a few weeks ago does not cost zero. It cost $5 trillion.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 2 minutes.
The official congressional scorekeepers said on Friday that the Build Back Broke bill that passed out of here a couple weeks ago did not cost 1.5 trillion, did not cost 2 trillion, but cost $5 trillion. But this administration will say it costs zero. The American people sees right through it. They see right through this mess. And they know one thing. They know that this is nothing but hogwash. It is hogwash, Mr. Speaker. And we should instead replace all of these reconciliation instructions to bring forward a plan to reduce the deficit and stop the inflation that is destroying family budgets. Mr. Speaker, I ask all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to defeat the previous question so that we can actually work on legislation to help American families at the supermarket, to help combat a price spike that is pushing working families to the brink, and to actually provide some real solutions this week on behalf of the American people whom we represent in this body. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate Mr. Smith's enthusiasm and exuberance. The arguments that folks would make that House Democrats are responsible for the spending of the Trump administration and the Trump White House, that argument is frankly absurd.
Bro, stop
and
blaming
happened
him.
during a global pandemic. So we had much work to do to spare the American public. But I'm going to do this. Moved by the spirit of the season, I'm going to bestow a gift on members, and I'm going to not rebut point by point, but rather reserve and allow
from Texas and yield to him 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, if our friends across the aisle are concerned about paying our bills and they're alarmed by the debt, then I think we should all get together, all 435 members, and talk about fiscal responsibility and pass a balanced budget amendment. That is the way forward and to avert this financial catastrophe that we're flirting with. Let's be very candid, Mr. Speaker, about what we're doing here. Let's be candid with the American people about what we're doing here in this chamber tonight. This is about a debt ceiling limit increase to ram through more wasteful and reckless spending. We are renovating our house in Texas, and I found an old political mailer, 9-year-old mailer, and I was outraged about the fact that we had a $14 trillion debt. Today, that's $29 trillion. It's not about placing blame on Republicans or Democrats. It's about recognizing we have an issue that's going to destroy this country if we don't address it. And we continue to kick the can down the road and land that can on the backs of future generations, like my 15-year-old son and my 12-year-old son. There are failed states in this world. Here is a $100 trillion bill from the nation of Zimbabwe. It's worth maybe 40 cents. It's essentially worthless. That could be what we end up with if we don't recognize the fact that at the local level, cities can't spend more than they take in, counties can't, even states can't. So why does the federal government get to? Because we own a printing press down the street?
Yeah.
Let's be responsible. Let's work together. This chamber 20 plus years ago passed a balanced budget amendment, if I'm not mistaken, and it failed in the Senate. It's time to do the right thing, the courageous thing, the American thing, and pass a balanced budget amendment. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Well, I would just note, I wonder when the gentleman finished his home's renovations, whether he paid the contractor or refused to pay because he might be tempted to do renovations in the future. With that, I'll yield back.
That made no sense.
Reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
What a stupid jab. He didn't do renovations to a broken house and made it more broken, and then be like, yeah, we'll let the next guys fix it. What the fuck?
I'll yield myself the balance of our time.
Gentleman's recognized.
And Mr. Speaker, just before I close, I do want to take a moment and acknowledge that it was 1 year ago last night that the FedEx trucks departed from Kalamazoo, Michigan, carrying the very first doses of what we now know as the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. And when you stop and reflect upon what was accomplished between the middle of May and the middle of December of 2020, it truly was a startling scientific accomplishment. Not one, not two, but 3 vaccines. We told ourselves at the beginning of the Operation Warp Speed process that if we got 40 to 45% effectiveness, it would be a victory. And those vaccines delivered in excess of 90%. People might quibble and say, well, you got to get a booster, you got to get an additional shot. We are so fortunate to have those tools to be able to combat this illness. We're by no means through, but then even just last week, the additional news that now an oral medication, the so-called Tamiflu for coronavirus, is now available, which I submit is going to change with the application of additional therapeutics is really going to change the equation. And I just wanted to take a minute and reflect on that. We are, again, just one day past the 1-year anniversary of Kalamazoo, Michigan, delivering that vaccine to the world. Otherwise, in closing to this argument, raising the debt ceiling to $2.5 trillion does seem a tad irresponsible in the middle of unprecedented spending by House Democrats. You know, you've got control of the White House, you've got control of the Senate, you've got control of the House, and you haven't passed a single appropriations bill. I mean, how are we supposed to run our business if we will not do our normal work and pass a budget and pass the 12 appropriations bills? The federal government is currently operating under the second continuing resolution of this fiscal year. 1/3 of federal spending is done through discretionary appropriations. you stop and think about it, that's really not much. That means 2/3 comes through on autopilot. But the amount that we actually tell ourselves that we're going to control, the 1/3 of the federal budget, we haven't done our work. Now we're talking about raising the debt limit to pay for trillions of dollars in spending, and the Democrats won't even fund the basic functions of government through regular appropriations. And that actually comes at a cost. It is very difficult to get a phone call answered by a federal agency, by the head of a federal agency, by a cabinet secretary, because we no longer make the appropriations. I mean, these folks are relatively new on the job within the last year. They have no history of knowing that they've got to come to Congress to get their appropriations bills passed. And so as a consequence, they basically ignore the Congress. Democrats are desperate to push through as much social spending as they can because the balance of power, quite likely, is getting ready to change. Why else would they be so reckless in such a short amount of time with the Americans' hard-earned taxpayer dollars? We cannot push inflation higher by raising the debt limit to allow for trillions in additional partisan spending. And here's the real problem that is going to lead to that balance of power shift. It is inflation that is at levels that have not been seen since the Carter administration. And again, my prediction is over the next 6 months, this is going to become a great deal worse. It will be unsustainable for most American families who live paycheck to paycheck.
Didn't I say I was scared about what's coming to America?
It's
this dude on the right time.
Level that is driving that inflation level, and we're doing nothing to put the brakes on that. So again, I'm going to urge a no vote on the previous question so we can get to the talk for fiscal sanity, no on the underlying measure, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me echo Dr. Burgess's comments about the vaccine, and I want to encourage every American to get that vaccine. We still have far too many people who have chosen not to get the vaccine.
Fuck that vaccine shit, bro. We ain't getting it. Next,
for those who have
go on.
Or who have available under the messenger RNA to do a third shot, but we encourage every single American to do it, and I want to make sure we repeat that, and I join with my colleague in thanking those who made that possible. I also, Mr. Speaker, want to thank all of my colleagues for their work in support of the rule before us today. As I mentioned earlier, protecting U.S. creditworthiness is a sacred responsibility, and it would be an abdication of that sacred responsibility to fail to address the debt limit and ensure that the United States government pays its bills. We've heard a lot of rhetoric today, but we all know that the measure before us today is not about new spending. No matter how many times it's said, it's not about new spending. We are acting today to ensure that America can pay its obligations that we've already agreed to incur. Pretending otherwise is a disservice to the American people. Mr. Speaker, I urge a yes vote on the rule in the previous question. I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Hey.
Gentleman from Texas.
The voice vote, I'd like to request the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device.
We can't see that shit. All right. Like, everybody vaccinated in that fucking thing, but everybody still got to wear masks. You see how stupid that shit is? Oh, okay. Okay. Democrat. Hold on.
What?
All right. In ordering the previous question, yay, nay, prez. Democrats got 2 yays. I don't get it. What does NIV stand for? I'm lost.
What purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Sewell of Alabama, I inform the House that Ms. Sewell will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Torres of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Torres will vote yes on the previous question. And as the member designated by Ms. Bass of California, I inform the House that Ms. Bass will vote yes on the previous question.
All right. We got 7 yeas.
This is the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition.
As the member designated by Ms. Underwood of Illinois, I inform the House that Ms. Underwood will vote yes on the previous question.
Purposes the gentleman from Texas seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Muser of Pennsylvania, I inform the House that Mr. Muser will vote nay on the previous question.
All right, 7-4.
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Representative Van Drew of New Jersey, I inform the House that Dr. Van Drew will vote nay on the previous question. As the representative designated by Representative Reschenthaler from Pennsylvania, I inform the House that Mr. Reschenthaler will vote nay on the previous question.
6-7.
As the member designated by Representative Stefanik of New York, I inform the House that Ms. Stefanik will vote nay on the previous question.
7-7.
As a member designated by Mr. Diaz-Balart of the state of Florida,
Woo,
I inform the
got a
House
list
that
of names.
Mr. Diaz-Balart will vote nay on the previous question.
8-7 on
As
nay.
the member designated by Representative McCall of the state of Texas, I inform the House that Mr. McCall will vote nay on the previous question.
Damn. So we got 6 nays, 12 yays. Looks like we're getting a stimmy, boys. All the poor ass motherfuckers out there. Y'all get a stimmy. Oh, me too. 14-6. Jesus Christ. It's dropping down, boys. It looks like Build Back Better. It's gonna come in. Triple B's, baby.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Green of Tennessee, I inform the House that Mr. Green will vote nay on the previous question.
All right.
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Bilirakis of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Bilirakis will vote nay on the previous question. Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Graves of Missouri, I inform the House that Mr. Graves will vote nay on the previous question. And finally, Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Loudermilk of Georgia, I inform the House that Mr. Loudermilk will vote nay on the previous question. Thank you.
All right, we got 7 yays, 8 nays. All right, 18-9.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Hagedorn of Minnesota, I inform the House that Mr. Hagedorn will vote no on the previous question.
It's nay, you fucking tool. All right, 18-12. Republicans, man, we're gaining up. This is what I like to see.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Blumenauer of Oregon, Dr. Lowenthal of California, Mr. DeSanya of California, Ms. Barragan of California, Ms. Johnson of Texas, Mr. Cohen of Tennessee, Mr. Moulton of Massachusetts, and Mr. Neal of Massachusetts. I inform the House that those 8 members will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
19-17. It's getting close, motherfuckers. It's getting close. 2018. Come on, Republicans. We got to do this. Time is remaining. 10 minutes remaining left. The polls are still in, boys and girls. 395 motherfuckers haven't voted in yet. 2020.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Swazi of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Swazi will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Butterfield of North Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Butterfield will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Peters of California, I inform the House that Mr. Peters will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Kilmer of Washington, I inform the House that Mr. Kilmer will vote yes on the previous question.
All right, right
For what
now.
purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Republicans are
Mr.
winning,
Speaker, as
baby.
the member designated by Mr. Baird of Indiana, I inform the House that Mr. Baird will vote no on the previous question.
Yeah.
As the member designated by Mr. Guthrie of Kentucky, I inform the House that Mr. Guthrie will vote no on the previous question.
All right, 23, 20, 24, guys.
For what purposes does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Nunes of California, I inform the House that Mr. Nunes will vote no on the previous question. And as a member designated by Mr. Calvert of California, I inform the House that Mr. Calvert will vote no on the PQ.
27, 25. Jesus Christ, it's neck and neck. Pause. 28, 25.
Gentleman from Florida seek recognition.
Yeah, we're not.
Mr. Speaker, as the
We're
member
not standing with
designated by
We're not standing with
member
that.
Joe Wilson from South Carolina, I inform
what's up with your
Speaker
tie, bro?
that Mr. Wilson will vote nay on the previous question.
Yeah,
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Delaware seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the
That's the
member
yay side.
designated by Ms. DeGette of Colorado and Ms. Beatty of Ohio, I inform the House that Ms. DeGette and Ms. Beatty will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
And
Mr. Speaker, as a member
31-26.
designated by
Democrats are
Ms.
winning.
Walorski of Indiana,
Democrats
I
are
inform the
winning,
House
boys
that
and
Mr. Walorski
girls.
will vote no on the previous question. And as the member designated by Mr. Long of Missouri, I inform the House that Mr. Long will vote no on the previous question.
34-26. Fuck! What's up, y'all? 27-34. Republicans are still in the game. Jesus Christ. $35-29, everybody. 35-29. You got 370 motherfuckers left. 186 on the Dem side, 184 on the Republican side. And independents, they don't have a say because them niggas are a bunch of bitches. I don't know what color is the independents. What are they, yellow, green? I don't know.
Purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker,
Oh, it's
as
on the
member
yay side.
designated by Mr. Rush of Illinois, I inform the House that Mr. Rush will vote yes on the previous question.
He said that shit like the NBA guy. Now, the Houston Rockets choose as their 8th pick. I'm like, Jesus Christ. I think I did that shit mad announcer like. All right, boys. We're still in this. We're still in this. 37-30, 38-39, motherfuckers. We in this, bro. We not giving up. We got 6 minutes left in the time. We still doing this. 39-39, 40-39, baby. Republicans are back on top. That's what I'm talking about, man. This is how we do it, man. It keeps it going. 40-40. All right. Democrats are tied up. It's really neck and neck. Pause with all this crazy shit. 42-40. Jesus, who the hell?
For what purpose does the
It's gonna be
gentleman
this
from
motherfucker
Nebraska
here.
seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member designated by Mr. Lamborn from Colorado, I inform the House that Mr. Lamborn will vote no on the previous question.
Nice. 43-40. Democrats are right now still ahead. 44-42. Republicans just got their 2 votes in. 5 minutes and 20
For what purpose
seconds
does
left.
the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker,
Oh,
as a
she's
member
hot as
designated by
fuck.
Mr. Paul Gosar from Arizona, I inform the House that Mr.
Mhm.
Gosar will vote no on the previous question.
Yes, baby. Vote no. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. 5 minutes left, boys and girls. 47-43,
For what
man.
purpose
Democrats
does the
are on top of
gentleman
this.
from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Distinguished Speaker, sir, as a member designated by Mr. Joe Neguse of the 2nd Congressional District of Colorado, I inform the House that Mr. Neguse will vote yes on the previous question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You're doing a great job.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. LaHood of Illinois, I inform the House that Mr. LaHood will vote no.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Huffman, I inform the House that Mr. Huffman will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated for
Oh my
Mr.
God.
Curtis, Mr. Owens, Mr. Moore from Utah, and Mr. Simpson from Idaho, I inform the House that Mr. Curtis, Mr. Moore, Mr. Owens, and Mr. Simpson will vote no on the previous question.
All right, 53-50. 3 minutes
For what purpose does
left
the gentlewoman from
and 50
Texas
seconds
seek
left.
recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Escobar of Texas, I inform the House that Ms. Escobar will vote yes on the previous question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Cole of Oklahoma, I inform the House that Mr. Cole will vote nay on the previous question. And Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Hearn of Oklahoma, I inform the House that Mr. Hearn will vote nay on the previous question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
As the member designated by Representative Hayes of Connecticut, I inform the House that Representative Hayes will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Representative Newman of Illinois, I inform the House that Ms. Newman will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Ms. Axney of Iowa, I inform the House that Ms. Axney will vote yes on the previous question.
57-61, baby. Let's go, man. Republicans winning this bitch, man. Fuck that. We not raising the debt. 2 minutes and 30 seconds left, baby. 64-60.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as member designated by the following members, I inform the House that the following members will vote yes on the previous question. Adriano Espaillat, Grace Napolitano, Vicente Gonzalez, Juan Vargas, Kurt Schrader, Sarah Jacobs, and Ed Case.
All right. We're up by 5, boys and girls. 70-65, man. Republicans are up. We got 2 minutes left. We still got an easy 299 people voting.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Amodei pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Amodei will vote no on HRES 852.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Strickland from Washington, I inform the House that Ms. Strickland will vote yes on the previous question.
65-72, baby. A minute and 20 left, baby. We not raising that. Sorry, Dems. Man, y'all Demis are tight.
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Ocasio-Cortez of New York, I inform the House that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez will vote yes on the previous question.
Oh, of course AOC votes yes.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Hartzler from Missouri, I inform the House that Ms. Hartzler will vote nay on the previous question.
Hey, Missouri,
What
where the
purpose does the
schizo
gentleman
bitch
from New
lives.
Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by the following members, I inform the House that the following members will vote yes on the previous question. And those are Mr. Payne of New Jersey, Mr. Series of New Jersey, Mr. Nadler of New York, Mr. Tonko of New York, Mr. Pasquarello of New Jersey, Ms. Kirkpatrick of Arizona, and Ms. Watson Coleman of New Jersey.
82-68, baby. We
For what
winning
purpose
this.
does the gentleman from California
Unanimous.
seek recognition?
Unanimous,
Mr.
motherfuckers.
Speaker, as a member designated
You better
by
got 28
Ms. Porter,
motherfuckers in there.
Mr. Ruiz, Mr. Rupersberger, and Mr. Barra, I inform the House that Ms. Porter, Mr. Ruiz, Mr. Rupersberger, and Mr. Barra will vote yes on the previous question.
72-94, baby. We're done.
For what purpose does the gentleman from
1.
Alabama seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Brooks from Alabama, I inform the House that Mr. Brooks will vote no on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Bowman, I inform the House that Mr. Bowman will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek
We
recognition?
182 people.
Mr. Speaker, as the member
101
designated by Mrs.
by
Herrera
82.
Butler of Washington and Mr. Reed of
We
New
up.
York,
We up.
I inform
And
the
it's
House
up.
that these
And it's
members
up.
will
And it's
vote
up.
no
And it's
on the
up.
previous question.
This is the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Horsford of Nevada, I inform the House that Mr. Horsford will vote yea on the motion to move the previous question on HRES 852.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek
go.
recognition?
106.85.
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Katko of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Katko will vote nay on the previous question. Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Kinzinger of Illinois, I inform the House that Mr. Kinzinger will vote nay on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Hampshire seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by the following list of members, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on the previous question. Suzanne Bonamici, Julia Brownlee, Catherine Clark, Lois Frankel, Grace Mang, Shelley Pingree, Melanie Stansberry.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Gomer of Texas, I inform the House he will vote no on the previous question. And as a member designated by Mr. Carter of Texas, I inform the House he will vote no on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
118 by
Mr.
92,
Speaker,
baby. Republicans on this,
Mr.
man.
Lawson informed the House that Mr. Lawson will vote yes on HR 852, ordering the previous question. Mr. Speaker, as a member designated to inform the House that Mr. Boyle will vote yes on order the previous question, H Resolution 852. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Doyle informed the House that will vote yes on voting previous question 852.
For what
All right,
purpose
we
does
up
the
by
gentlewoman from
100.
Texas
We up
seek
by
recognition?
23. It's 101 by
Mr. Speaker, as
123.
the member
Let's
designated by
go.
Ms. Miller from the state of West Virginia, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Ms. Miller will vote no on the previous question.
Nice,
And as the
nice.
member designated by Mr. Jackson from the state of Texas, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Jackson will also vote no on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
And still I rise, Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Henry Cuellar of Texas. I inform the House that Mr. Cuellar will vote yes on the previous question.
110 by 128.
Purpose does the
110 by
gentleman from
129.
Washington seek recognition?
As the member designated by Representative Del Bene of Washington State, I inform the House that Representative Del Bene will vote yes on the previous question.
For what
All right.
purpose does the gentlewoman
84
from
Dems.
Florida
Thanks, bitch.
does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
As a member designated by Mr. Welsh of Vermont, I inform the House that Mr. Welsh will vote yes on the previous question. And as a member designated by Ms. Trahan of Massachusetts, I inform the House that Ms. Trahan will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Dakota seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Armstrong pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Armstrong of North Dakota will vote no on the previous question.
Yo, why he looks like the dude that plays the Flash
For what purpose does the
in
gentleman
the
from
TV
Minnesota
shows?
seek
Ha!
recognition?
Barry! What I
As
do,
the member
Barry?
designated by Mr. Mondaire Jones, I inform the House that Mr. Jones will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Yeah, the Dems
Mr.
are tight.
Speaker,
They know
as the
they're
member
losing.
designated by Mr.
Yeah.
Jacobs of New York, who just welcomed his baby girl
Who
Jane
cares?
this evening into the world. I inform the House that Mr. Jacobs will vote nay on the previous question.
Good shit.
And Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Joyce of Ohio, I inform the House that Mr. Joyce will vote nay on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Christ, I inform the House that Mr. Christ will vote yay on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a representative designated by Representative McMorris Rogers of Washington,
Another nay, boys.
Representative Carl of Alabama, and Representative Lesko of Arizona, I inform the House that Representative McMorris Rogers, Representative Carl, and Representative Lesko of Arizona will all vote no on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Gottheimer, I inform the House that Mr. Gottheimer will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the
All right,
gentleman
Dems are
from
coming up. I'm not
Ohio
gonna lie.
seek recognition?
We're running out of
As a member
Republicans.
designated by Ms.
We
Kim
all
of
Reds
California, I
gotta
inform the
stay
House that
in.
Ms. Kim will vote no on the previous question.
Oh, shit.
For what
Like Jeff
purpose does the
Bezos'
gentleman
dad.
from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by
get a
John Garamendi
toupee,
of
my
California, I
brother.
inform the House that Mr. Garamendi will vote
Got a
yes
little-
on the previous question.
Got a little cul-de-sac going
For
up
what
there,
purpose does
brother.
the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Sessions of Texas, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Sessions will vote
Fletcher of Texas to inform the House that Ms. Fletcher will vote aye on the previous question. I rise as the representative
Yo,
of
hurry
Lloyd
up, hurry up.
Doggett
Hurry up.
to inform the House that Mr. Doggett will vote on the previous question.
Always the Dems
And
gotta
I
do
am the
some
member
long
designated
shit,
by
bro.
Ms.
Oh
Jayapal,
my
and I
God.
rise to inform the House that Ms. Jayapal will vote aye on the previous question.
142 to 155, man. Republicans are still in this, man. Democrats are coming up slowly. We got 57 Republicans left to vote with 78 Democrats to vote. We got man, this is looking pretty tight, man. 157. We just going up. We're just, and it's up, and it's up, and it's up, and it's up, man. 144, 145 to 158. Democrats slowly climbing up. 146 to 158. 147 to 158.
For what purpose does the gentleman from
Oh, that was a
California
Republican that
seek
voted
recognition?
for yay.
As the member designated by Mr. Swalwell, I inform the House that Mr. Swalwell will vote aye on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Cardenas, I inform the House that Mr. Cardenas will vote aye on the previous question.
For what purpose does the
150
gentleman
by
from Arizona seek
161. Democrats are down by 11 now. Before they had a
Mr.
good
Speaker, as the member designated by
23-inch lead.
Mr. Grijalva
The
and Mr.
Republicans
Halloran,
had.
I
Now
inform
they're
the House
down
that
by.
Mr.
Now the
Grijalva
Republicans
and
are
Mr.
only
Halloran
up
will
by
vote
11
yes on the
from what
previous
I
question.
saw. Let's look at it now. 151 to 162.
For what purpose does the gentleman from
these are up
Indiana
by
seek
13.
As the member designated by Mr. Cahaly, I inform the House that Mr. Cahaly will vote yes on the previous question.
$152 to $165. Republicans are still on this. I'm faithful. Everybody's gonna say nay. We're not gonna raise the debt limit. We're not gonna fuck us up. We're gonna keep doing what we gotta do. We still got 47 Republicans left and 67 Democrats left to vote. In total, we have about 113. So honestly, it can really go either way. We still got a bunch of votes in. You know, we just got to keep pushing that positive energy. Put your hands up, motherfuckers, like Goku in the Spirit Bomb, bro. Put that shit up to the Republicans, bro. Put out that nay energy, bro. Come on. Put out that nay energy, motherfuckers, because it's getting crazy. It's getting crazy. $161 to $174, boys and girls. 98 fucking voters left. It's getting real close, baby. Real fucking close. And now I have to fucking pee.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Zeldin in New York, I inform the House Mr. Zeldin will vote nay on the previous question.
It's definitely upstate New York. Shout out to upstate New York. Let's go. 39. We got 39 Republicans left in this game. 54 Democrats. 92 in total, man. Let's go. Man,
Says the gentleman from
169,
North Carolina.
174.
As member designated by Mr. Lukemeyer of Missouri, I inform
This
the
is
House
looking
that
like
Mr.
the
Lukemeyer
Hillary.
will vote no on the previous question.
It's
As
looking like
member
the Trump
designated by
race,
Ms.
but on the
Wagner of
Democrat
Missouri, I
side.
inform the House that Ms.
Oh, that guy's
Wagner
jacket
will vote
is
no on the previous
fresh.
question.
Heard you, Poppy. Heard you. 171 to 176, boys. It's getting closer now. It's getting closer now. We're running out of our Republican ammo. This isn't gonna look really good. We gotta put that energy towards the Dems. Hopefully, we got some nay energies in the Dem side. If not, man, it's gonna be sad over here. But 174 to
For
177.
what purpose does the
Dems made a
gentleman from
comeback.
Michigan seek recognition?
As member designated
Oh,
by
hey,
Mr.
baby.
Cawthorn of North Carolina,
I love me a
inform the
girl
House
with them
Mr.
glasses.
Cawthorn will vote no on the previous question.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm talking about. Here we go. 177, 178 to 177. Dems are finally up since the double digits. The Dems finally got up. Now it's tied. Here we go, bro. Republicans, man, we not giving up, bro. We not giving up, man. I mean, I say we like if I'm a fucking Republican. But let's go. 180, 180. 181, 180, man. We back on fucking top, baby. That shit wasn't gonna last too long. Fuck out of here. Fuck out of here. That's what I'm talking about. 181, 181. Let's fucking motherfuckers. Man, this shit is fucking crazy. You already know. RoundTable vibes, man.
The gentlewoman
The
from
fucking
New York
Dems are fucking winning, man.
As the member
Look
designated
at
by
that
Chairwoman
fucking ugly,
Nydia
crusty
Velasquez,
bitch. Yo, what's
I
that
inform
bald
the
spot,
House
bro?
that
What
Ms.
is that?
Velasquez will vote yes on the previous question.
All right, 184, 183, man. We tied up, boys. We tied up, boys. 28 Republicans left, 36. Republicans literally have 8 more fucking votes than us right now in the pocket. So
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, thank you. As a member designated by Mr. Troy Nels, I'd like to inform the House that Mr. Nels will be voting nay on the previous question. Thank you.
thank you. 189 to 185, boys and girls. Looks like we getting a yay. Let's keep pushing our energy up there, man. Positive, Goku, Spirit Bomb energy up there, fellas. I already told y'all.
Recognition.
The gentleman from California rises as a member designated by Representative Linda Sanchez. Pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Representative Sanchez will vote yea on the move of the previous question, HRes 852.
$195 to 189, fellas. Build back better. Motherfuckers. These motherfuckers.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Kay Granger from the great state of Texas, I inform the House that Ms. Granger will be a nay on the previous question. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek
Mr.
recognition?
Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Titus of Nevada, I inform the House Ms. Titus will vote
Why you
aye
sound like
on
you're
the
from
previous
Boston?
question. And as the member designated by Mr. Price of North Carolina, I inform the House Mr. Price will vote aye on the previous question. And as the member designated by Mr. Khanna of California, I inform the House Mr. Khanna will vote aye on the previous question.
Mr. Speaker.
Question.
Fuck. All right. Dems are up. Dems are up by 9. Dems are up by 9. Here we got 39 niggas left. We got 19. Even if all the Republicans vote right now, and all the Democrats vote, the Democrats will have the fucking majority. So we have to legit hope that the remaining Democrats vote nay. Vote nay, motherfuckers. $205 to $197, folks. 16-16 on both sides left. 32 overall, man. I mean, I feel like with this check, we'll get a stimmy, right? So if it's yay, so either way I win, but I still don't want to send that thing because it's, well, think about. Like, I'm telling you. All right, all right.
Who is it? For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as
That's
a member
right.
designated by Mr. Buchanan, I inform the House that Mr. Buchanan will vote nay on the previous question. Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Mast of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Mast will vote nay on the previous question.
There we go, boys. 206 to 202. Democrats are up in the game by 4. All right. We still got 15 Democrats left in the pocket, and we still got 11 Republicans left in the pocket to vote. So we're getting down to the wire.
What purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by
Oh,
Mr. Posey
nice
of the
thickums,
Sunshine
baby.
State,
What's
I
up,
inform
baby?
the House that Mr. Posey will vote nay on the previous question.
I bet you
As
he
the member
will.
designated by Mr. Jimenez of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Jimenez will vote nay on the previous question. And as the member designated by Ms. Salazar of the Sunshine State, I inform the House that Ms. Salazar will vote nay on the previous question.
What purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member
We're down to
designated
the
by
last
following
20
members, I
voters in the
inform House
pocket,
of
boys and
following
girls.
members. Virginia, Wilson, Florida, Krishnamurthy, Illinois.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
As a member designated by Representative Leger Fernandez, and inform the House that Representative Leger Fernandez will vote aye on the previous question.
All right, we're only down by 4. We're only down by 4. All right, 18 voters left in the pocket. 210 Democrats, 207 Republicans. 17 in the pocket now. $211 to 208. Okay, that was a Democrat. Democrat voted yay. All right. We got 9 Democrats and 5 Republicans left in the pocket. The official standing being 213 to 208, 214 to 208. Another Democrat just voted. 215. Jesus. We got 6 Democrats left, 4 Republicans. We got 10 in total. Literally, we need all this. Nah, that's it, bro. We lost. Yeah, man. The Democrats got the vote. It's unanimous now. Oh, man. Democrats won, man. It's yay. Build back better. Ah, man. It's crazy. This is it, man. As you guys, whoever's tuning in now to this point in time, man, the Democrats have won the Build Back Better deal. Yeah. Here we are. These last 3 votes don't even matter. Like, they can go anywhere, honestly. It doesn't change anything. Oh, man. How trash. Just waiting for them to do this final verdict.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Spear, I inform the House that Ms. Spear will vote yes on the previous question.
Yeah, well, 1-1 left. You got 2 people left in the pocket. You got 220 votes for the Democrats, 212 for the Republicans.
On this vote, the yeas are 220, the nays are 212. Previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Gentleman from Texas. Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. There's my vote. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Member designated by Mr. Katko of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Katko will vote nay on the rule. And Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Kinzinger of Illinois, I inform the House that Mr. Kinzinger will vote nay on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by the following members, I inform the House that the following members will vote yes on HRes 852, and those are Mr. Payne of New Jersey, Mr. Series of New Jersey, Mr. Nadler of New York, Mr. Tonko of New York, Mr. Pasquarello of New Jersey, Ms. Kirkpatrick of Arizona, and Ms. Watson Coleman of New Jersey.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated for Mr. Curtis, Mr. Moore, Mr. Owens from Utah, and Mr. Simpson from Idaho, I inform the House that Mr. Curtis, Mr. Moore, Mr. Owens, and Mr. Simpson will vote nay on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
As a member designated by Representative Leger Fernandez, I inform the House that Leger Fernandez will vote aye on HR 852.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mrs. Herrera Butler of Washington State and Mr. Reed of New York, I inform the House that those members will vote no on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Neal of Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton of Massachusetts, Ms. Johnson of Texas, Mr. Cohen of Tennessee, Ms. Barragan of California, Dr. Lowenthal of California, Mr. DeSania of California, and Mr. Blumenauer of Oregon. And from the House of those 8 members will vote yes on HRS 852.
what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Hearn of Oklahoma and Mr. Cole of Oklahoma, I inform the House that Mr. Hearn and Mr. Cole will vote no on the rule. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Rush of Illinois, I inform the House that Mr. Rush will vote yes on HRES 852.
What purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Amadei, pursuant to House Resolution A, I inform the House that Mr. Amadei will vote no on agreeing to the resolution H52.
What purpose does
Damn,
the gentlewoman from
deflated.
Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mondaire Jones, I inform the House that Mr. Jones will vote yes on HRES 852.
What purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a representative designated by Representative McMorris Rogers of Washington, Representative Carl of Alabama, and Representative Lesko of Arizona, I inform the House that Ms. McMorris Rogers, Mr. Carl, and Ms. Lesko will all vote no on the roll.
What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as member designated by the following individuals, I inform the House that the following individuals vote yes on HRES 852. Adriano Espaillat, Grace Napolitano, Vicente Gonzalez, Juan Vargas, Kurt Schrader, Sarah Jacobs, and Ed Case.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Nebraska rise?
Madam Speaker, as member designated by Mr. Doug Lamborn, Colorado, inform the House that Mr. Lamborn will vote no on the rule.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by
Love
Ms.
this
Titus
guy.
of Nevada, I inform the House Ms. Titus will vote aye on HRES 852.
Madam Speaker.
As the member designated by Mr. Price of North Carolina, I inform the House Mr. Price will vote aye on HRES 852. And as the member designated by Mr. Khanna of California, I inform the House Mr. Khanna will vote aye on HRES 852. And as the member designated by Ms. Roybal Allard of California, I inform the House Ms. Roybal Allard will also vote aye on HRES 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Muser of Pennsylvania, I inform the House that Mr. Muser will vote nay on the rule. As the member designated by Dr. Van Drew of New Jersey, I inform the House that Dr. Van Drew will vote no on the rule. As a member designated by Representative Reschenthaler of Pennsylvania, I inform the House that Mr. Reschenthaler will vote no on the rule. As a member designated by Representative Stefanik of New York, I inform the House that Representative Stefanik will vote no on the rule. As a member designated by Representative Diaz-Balart of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Diaz-Balart will vote no on the rule. And as a member designated by Mr. McCall of Texas, I inform the House that Mr. McCall will vote no on the rule.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Escobar of Texas, I inform the House that Ms. Escobar will vote yes on House Res 852. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What purposes does the gentleman from Tennessee rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Bilirakis of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Bilirakis will vote nay on the rule. Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Green of Tennessee, I inform the House that Mr. Green will vote nay on the rule. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Loudermilk of Georgia, I inform the House that Mr. Loudermilk will vote nay on the rule. And Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Graves of Missouri, I inform the House that Mr. Graves will vote nay on the rule. Thank you.
For what purposes does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Huffman, I inform the House that Mr. Huffman will vote yes on HRES 852.
Pause, nigga. Don't call me that shit, nigga. I ain't your beloved.
What purposes does the gentlewoman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Miller from the state of West Virginia, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Ms. Miller will vote no on Resolution 852. And as the member designated by Mr. Jackson from the state of Texas, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Jackson will also vote no on House Resolution 852.
What purposes, gentleman from Pennsylvania, rise?
Madam Speaker, I got the following list. Mr. Lawson informs the House that will vote yes on HR Resolution 852. Mr. Boyle will vote yes on Resolution 852. Mr. Doyle will vote yes on the final on that motion.
For what purposes, gentleman from Ohio, rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Kim of California,
Jeff
I inform
Bezos'
the House
dad
that
is here,
Ms.
guys.
Kim will vote no on the rule.
What purposes, gentleman from Wisconsin, rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Bowman, I inform the House that Mr.
Calvert of California, inform the House that Mr. Calvert will vote no on the rule, and as the member designated by Mr. Nunes of California, Mr. Nunes will vote no on the rule.
For what purposes, gentleman from Texas, rise?
Madam Speaker, and still I rise as the member designated by Mr. Cuellar of Texas. I inform the House that Mr. Cuellar will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes, gentleman from Texas, rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Gomer of Texas, I inform the House he will vote no on the rule. As a member designated by Mr. Carter of Texas, I inform the House he will vote no on the rule.
For what purposes, the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Spear, I inform the House that Ms. Spear will vote yes on HRES 852.
What purposes, the gentleman rise from Texas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a member designated by Mr. Sessions of Texas, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Sessions will vote no on SJ Res 33 on the rule.
Purposes, the gentleman from California, rise.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Swalwell, I inform the House that Mr. Swalwell will vote aye on HRES 852. As a member designated by Mr. Cardenas, I inform the House that Mr. Cardenas will vote aye on HRES 852.
For what purposes, the gentleman from Florida, rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Wilson of South Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Wilson will vote no on H.R. 852.
For what purposes, the gentleman from Illinois, rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Underwood of Illinois, I inform the House that Ms. Underwood will vote yes on HRES 852.
This is the gentlewoman from Michigan, rise.
As a member designated by Mr. Cawthorn of North Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Cawthorn will vote no on HR 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
As a member designated by Ms. Ocasio-Cortez of New York, I inform the House that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes?
Guys, we already know how this story is going to end.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Hagedorn of Minnesota, I inform the House that Mr. Hagedorn will vote no on the rule.
What purposes does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Welch of Vermont, I inform the House that Mr. Welch will vote yes on HRES 852. And as a member designated by Ms. Trahan of Massachusetts, I inform the House that Ms. Trahan will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Brooks from Alabama, I inform the House that Mr. Brooks will vote no on the rule.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Indiana?
As the member designated by Mr. Cahaly, I inform the House that Mr. Cahaly will vote yes on the question.
For what purposes, gentleman from Texas, rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Kay Granger of the great state of Texas, I inform the House that Ms. Granger will be a nay on the rule. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purposes, gentlelady from Delaware, rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. DeGette of Colorado and Ms. Beatty of Ohio, I inform the House that Ms. DeGette and Ms. Beatty will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from South Dakota rise?
Madam Speaker, thank you. As the member designated by Mr. Armstrong pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Armstrong of North Dakota will vote no.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from New Hampshire rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by the following members, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on HRES 852. Suzanne Bonamici, Julia Brownlee, Catherine Clark, Lois Frankel, Grace Meng, Shelley Pengry, and Melanie Stansberry.
What purposes does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Baird of Indiana, I inform the House that Mr. Baird will vote no on the rule. As the member designated by Mr. Guthrie of Kentucky, I inform the House that Mr. Guthrie will vote no on the rule.
For what purposes does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Garamendi of California, I inform the House that Mr. Garamendi will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, thank you. As a member designated by Mr. Troy Nels, I'd like to inform the House that Mr. Nels will be voting nay on the rule. Thank you.
What purposes the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Ruiz, Mr. Barra, Mr. Rupersberger, and Ms. Porter, I inform the House that Mr. Barra, Mr. Ruiz, Ms. Porter, and Mr. Rupersberger will vote yes on House Resolution 852.
For what purposes the gentleman from Indiana rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Walorski of Indiana, I inform the House that Ms. Walorski will vote no on the rule. And as the member designated by Mr. Long of Missouri, I inform the House that Mr. Long will vote no on the rule.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Washington rise?
As a member designated by Representative Del Bene of Washington State, I inform the House that Representative Del Bene will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes the gentleman from Ohio rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. LaHood of Illinois, I inform the House that Mr. LaHood will vote no on the rule.
What purposes the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania rise?
As the member designated by Representative Hayes, Representative Newman, and Representative Axney, I inform the House that Representative Hayes, Representative Newman, and Representative Axney will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from New York rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Joyce of Ohio, I inform the House that Mr. Joyce will vote nay on the rule. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Jacobs of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Jacobs will vote nay on the rule.
What purposes does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Peters of California, I inform the House that Mr. Peters will vote yes on HRES 852. As the member designated by Mr. Butterfield of North Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Butterfield will vote yes on HRES 852. As the member designated by Mr. Kilmer of Washington, I inform the House that Mr. Kilmer will vote yes on HRES 852. And as the member designated by Mr. Swazi of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Swazi will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Tennessee?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Hartzler of Missouri, I inform the House that Ms. Hartzler will vote nay on the rule.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
Madam Chair, as a member designated by Mr. Grijalva and Mr. O'Halloran, I inform the House that Mr. Grijalva and Mr. O'Halloran will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Buchanan of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Buchanan will vote nay on the rule. Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Mast of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Mast will vote nay on the rule.
What purposes the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Representative Linda Sanchez, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Representative Linda Sanchez will vote yea on House Resolution 852.
What purposes the gentlewoman from Florida rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Jimenez, Mr. Salazar, or Mr. Posey, and Ms. Salazar, I inform the House that they will all respectively vote nay on the rule.
For what purposes the gentlewoman from New Jersey rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Gottheimer, I inform the House that Mr. Gottheimer will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
As a member designated by Mr. Lukemeyer of Missouri, I inform the House Mr. Lukemeyer will vote no on the rule. As a member designated by Ms. Wagner of Missouri, I inform the House Ms. Wagner will vote no on the rule.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Horsford of Nevada, I inform the House that Mr. Horsford will vote yea on HRES 852.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Zeller of New York, I inform the House Mr. Zeller will vote nay on the rule.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Maloney of New York, I inform the House that Ms. Maloney will vote yea on HRES 852.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Colorado rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Paul Gosar from Arizona, I inform the House that Mr. Gosar will vote nay on the rule.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Washington rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Strickland of Washington, I inform the House that Ms. Strickland will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Madam Speaker, the following members vote yes on HRES 852. DeFazio, Oregon. Trone, Maryland. McEachin, Virginia. Wilson, Florida. Christenberthy, Illinois.
Purposes the gentleman from Arizona rise?
As a member designated by Representative Leger Fernandez, I inform the House Representative Leger Fernandez will vote aye on HR 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Florida rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Chris, I inform the House that Mr. Chris will vote yea on HRES 852.
I kind of don't understand this, why they have
For
to
what
do an
purposes
agreement.
does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Fletcher of Texas pursuant to House Resolution 8, I rise to inform the House that Ms. Fletcher will vote aye on HR 852. As the member designated by Mr. Doggett of Texas pursuant to House Resolution 8, I rise to inform the House that Mr. Doggett will vote aye on HR 852. And as the member designated by Ms. Jayapal of Washington State, I rise to inform the House that Ms. Jayapal will vote aye on HR 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Rhode Island rise?
Presented by Mr. Torres of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Torres will vote yes on HRES 852. As the member designated by Ms. Bass of California, I inform the House that Ms. Bass will vote yes on HRES 852. And as the member designated by Ms. Sewell of Alabama, I inform the House that Ms. Sewell will vote yes on HRES 852.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
Thanks, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Mr. Joe Neguse of Colorado's 2nd Congressional District, I inform the House that Mr. Neguse will vote yes on HRES 852.
And that's it.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from New York rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member
Why are
designated
we
by
doing this?
Chairwoman Nadia
It's
Velasquez,
219
I
and
inform the
212,
House
fellas.
that Ms. Velasquez will vote yes
Or
on
220
HRES
something.
852.
Mm-hmm. And here we are, boys, the official standings. The Build Back Better deal. Bill, well, fuck. The BBB, baby, is going to be fucking pushed because the Democrats are a bunch of fucking babies. Our fucking debt limit's going to go up. We're going to owe man more money, and we're just going to worry about the future people that's going to have to take care of it, boys and girls. So... What do you think it's saying? Yo! Here we go. Oh, no.
On this vote, the yeas are 220 and the nays are 212. The resolution is adopted. That objection, the motion to reconsider, is laid on the table.
Well, there you have it, boys and girls. The round tables, 2 hour.
House will be in order.
Oh, here we go. She has something to say. Yeah.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Madam Speaker, following this weekend's disastrous storms across
there's another
western
bill.
Kentucky and the region,
All right. So, boys and girls, the Build Back Better bill is going to be pushed. It's on the next steps. Fuck it. Dems got the power. I'll get more on that on the Political Zoo when we talk about it with Drew and stuff. But I'm glad whoever got to hang on and watch the show. I'm sorry it was glitchy and echoey. I'm fixing that on the fly. Above all, everybody, I hope you guys have a good night. Take care. Sage way all the way, always.